All right. So go ahead, Coach, and just kind of tell a little bit about yourself and a little about your journey, and then you can get into squat.
Well, that's a good question. That's probably really boring, but long story short, I was fortunate to participate in college football. I'm not gonna say I played college football because that I really wasn't very good, but I played small college football at Baker University in Kansas. From there, I was a middle school coach for a year, spent 3 years in Virginia at the Virginia Military Institute as a instructor and also coach of the powerlifting team. And that's really where I decided and figured out that I wanted to be a strength coach. I didn't come out of college with those aspirations. And I'll be honest, I was pretty ignorant to what that looked like. Our D-line coach and D coordinator were all our strength coaches in college. And so I never really made that. I did actually take a class, a January class, where we talked to we went down to KU, talked to Javork Complexes. I can't remember his first name, but that was where I was exposed to bands and chains and really, didn't make that connection, for a long time. But anyway, so when I got to college, all I wanted to do was go back to my high school, coach D-line, and teach. And so that's where my mind was. But being in Virginia, being able to be around strength coaches, everybody in that department, I taught in the physical education department, we're former strength coaches, whether at Virginia Tech, JMU, Radford, UVA. And so I had some tremendous mentors at VMI while I was there. And that really was the time that I figured out, of course, years old, a wife and a child, that, hey, I want to be a strength coach. So from there came back, just like anybody else, sent out letters and called and asked around. And in 2012, I was very fortunate that Frank Wintrick at University of North Texas gave me a shot to be a 32-year-old intern. Frank's now at UCLA. He's been at a couple of different spots, BYU, UVA. Frank's a tremendous friend, and again, one of those guys that I owe a lot to. And so did that. Was the best summer. Nick Summerfield on here, he was actually a player at North Texas at the time, and so that's kind of cool. And so did that, and then again, I'm at that point I'm coaching middle. So I was at the Division I level, Division I intern, and now I'm coaching middle school athletes. And I truly believe that that's where you hone your coaching skill. That's where you figure out how to coach. When there's you and you got 90 kids and you got to make a football team out of them. And then not only that, but you have to develop them in a manner that is safe, and that, for some people, you know what you know. And unfortunately, a lot of times that's a barbell. And so, you take these middle school kids and you start loading them up and doing all these quote unquote technical movements with them. And you real quick that you better have another plan, because that's not the best option. One of the biggest compliments that I've ever got or received, or rather, after speaking at a conference was I talked about our middle school program, and a coach came up to me, a strength coach at that college came up to me and said, "Wow, I was really impressed. I thought you with your background being powerlifting and you'd have a lot of kids up there. Hey, look how strong these kids are." And it was goblet squats, and it was all these rudimentary movements, and we feel really good, because I do have a powerlifting background. That's where I've had some decent success, and so that's kind of where my roots are, but by no means is that foundation for how I train athletes. There are bits and pieces from it, obviously, I think there's some great tools to take away from powerlifting, but by no means is that how I. And for a long time, I didn't talk about my powerlifting background because there are connotations that go along with that. And I said, a while ago that I was a walking stereotype. I'm big, bald, beard. I love to bench press. And, when people think of strength coaches, and obviously there are, some different views out there, especially lately, of who and what we are. I didn't want to bring that to the table. I wanted people to learn about me as the coach first, and then, oh, by the way, he squatted 1,000 pounds, etc., whatever. So, anyway, that, I did that. Was at the middle school for 2.5 years. Got to Richland. I'm at Richland High School in North Richland Hills, Texas. I've been there since 2013 as a teacher and coach, and took over them 2015 as quoting the director of athletic performance. Also teach 4 periods a day in a special ed classroom. So I'm not one of the fortunate ones that have a exclusive schedule. So I do have teaching responsibilities, and so try to reach as many athletes as I can at school. So like I said, I've been there since 2013, full time 2015, and that's kind of my background. So if you got any questions and want to put them in the chat, please do that. And then Dalton, it will allow me to share my screen. Then I think I can do this little presentation. So does that work? All right.
Do you have the little button down there?
Yeah, I hit it. It said host disabled attendee screen sharing.
Oh, okay. Here we go. I got it fixed.
Yeah, I'm waiting on. I'm a little more prepared than Kyle was. Okay, I'm just right now. This is gonna be a lot better than he was.
Hey, Kyle and I had a bonding moment over that. Okay, so all right, man.
Hey, so I'll say this.
Sorry, I can't do that. You're not listening to the music app.
Oh, Siri. So my phone's right here. So I created a rule that I will not put any more videos in my PowerPoints because they never work. So there's not going to be any videos.
It makes it complicated.
If you wanted videos, it does make it complicated, So if you wanted videos, I'm sorry. But it's just again, I'm a very simple guy. I'm very simple, and this is what works best for me. So there's my information. Like I said, you can text me during this presentation. I've got my phone right here. If you want to use a chat, that's fine too. But that way, again, if I can ever help anybody on here, please, you guys reach out. Okay, I'll leave that up just a little bit longer, and then we'll move on. So our squatting progression starts very simply with a body weight squat. And then I already had a misspelling. It's not, there's an N in there. I apologize. Again, I'm a strength coach. I'm not an English teacher. So I haven't had as much caffeine today, so I apologize about that. But it all starts with the body weight squat with our progressions. And people want to talk about fancy movement screenings and FMS and there's I don't know, I guess there's others out there. That's the big one that I know is FMS. But you can tell a lot about an athlete by watching them perform a body weight squat. You're going to be able to see thoracic mobility and limitations. You're going to be able to see hip mobility and limitations. and then probably most importantly, you're going to see how their foot and ankle interact with one another. And I've progressed to the point that when we assess our athletes, we do so with them barefoot. And that's been really, that's the next progression in our program. I was telling our athletes just today, the attention being paid to the foot and the ankle. There's a lot of really, really good information out there with regards to how that foot and ankle apply and affect, sport performance, movement, and then rate of force development and how that body moves. And so you can really get a lot and take a lot away from just watching an athlete, hands behind, just squat. And so you can really, really see where they're deficient and also see where they're really, really good. So the best thing about this too is you can do this in a weight room or you can do it on a field. Here we are doing some bodyweight stuff at the bottom with our freshman group, and there's about 65 or 70 of them out there. And so you don't need bars, you don't need weights, you don't need any special equipment. All you need is space. And you can see some of them look really, really good, and some of them look not very good at all. But this is a great way as a coach to take a snapshot of where your athletes are within your program. And it's a great way to see immediately what your athletes need, where they're deficient, and how to address those. This was a few years ago. And if we were to do this today, again, like I said, we'd pop our shoes off and do it that way. But again, that it all starts, with that squat. Something that was a phrase that we used a lot when I was at UNT with Frank was never low dysfunction. And, I'm sure he got it from somewhere, but that's the thing is we want them to have some level of proficient movement. Now, in that same breath, and this might be contradictory, I do think that we can load them in a manner, and I'll talk about kind of how we do those things as we progress through this. But we have to remember, and Joe Ken talked about corrosive, competent, and then versus competition style technical math, if you want to call it that, proficiency. They don't have to be able to squat as good as, or I shouldn't say as good. Their squats are not going to look like Olympic lifter squats. Their squats aren't going to look like a powerlifting squat. Those are particular sports. And I think that's where a lot of coaches get in trouble. And I'll say this, I'm not a stickler on depth. And you say, well, wait a minute, powerlifter, top of the thigh, below parallel, crease of the hip, all this stuff, X, Y, Z, that's a different conversation. But everyone's going to have different movement patterns. Everyone's going to have different leverages. Everyone's going to have an optimal range of motion. And so that's our job, is for them to find that optimal range of motion. It's not that everybody has to put their butt on their calves. It's not. And, that might be taboo and that might be controversial, and I'm okay with that. But not everybody is going to squat exactly the same. And I think we're doing our athletes a disservice if we ask everybody in our room to squat to the same depth when you're trying to achieve mastery. And so, you walk in our weight room, you're going to see high squats, you're going to see low squats, you're going to see box squats, you're going to see, hopefully you see about 5 or 6 different variations, because our athletes progress differently. they mature differently, and they're built differently. And so I don't think there's one squat that's going to, you know, I've talked about too that be married to principles and not moves. Write your programs in pencil, don't chisel them in stone. And what I mean by that is don't be so hard-headed. I'm a back squat guy. I'm a low bar back squat guy. Everybody's got a back squat. Everybody's got to do this. Why? Well, because I believe. Well, why? What training effect are you trying to achieve? Lower body strength development. Well, there are about 20 different exercises and variations, some squat, some without squatting, where you can develop lower body strength besides just a straight bar on your back. And so hopefully you've got those various tools in your tool belt that you're not just using a one size fits all mentality when training athletes. You know, I don't think as strength coaches we get enough credit when you talk about the educational buzzwords, scaffolding, individualization, differentiation that we do. Hopefully you're doing as a strength conditioning coach. You know, we want to meet our athletes where they are. And again, just like in a classroom, I think it's even more important that we have that variation of movement within the weight room. And so we got off on a tangent just a little bit, but not everyone's going to squat the same. Not everyone's going to look the same. But in our program, we start with that body weight squat. Okay. And here's the counter. Next, after that, and so you're going to see this common theme of box, no box, box, no box, box, no box. So with that free squat or with that body weight squat, we're going to start them out to a box. A lot of times it's a milk crate, and that's where we're going to start everybody. Everyone might have the same starting point, but then that's where we make adjustments. That's where we begin to vary the height. And typically our freshmen will be at similar box heights. You know, as they progress older, then we begin to differentiate. But I want to start everybody out and just see, can they get there? What does it look like? And then profile that way. And I think that's important that we all start similarly and then progress that way. So the counterbalance squat, you can use a 5, 10, 2.5, a med ball, kettlebell, something that allows them to push their hips back. You know, when you're talking about the stance for the squat, we start with a shoulder width or maybe a little bit wider toes out stance. I'm not a super wide west side guy. I've never been a super wide squatter myself. And so I don't necessarily ask that of my athletes. I think it's important that we maintain an athletic base. Now, will we go wider if I'm looking to kind of emphasize hips during a particular cycle? Sure, we can. But as far as establishing what our base stance for the squat is going to be, it's going to be shoulder width or slightly wider with toes pointed between 30 and 45 degrees out. And then, like I said, we'll make adjustments based on that. And I really like squatting barefoot. We've done more of that this year than we ever have, particularly with the overhead squat. I think that's really, really good. And we'll overhead squat and then go into a back squat. And that's been a really good timer for us. A lot of guys just leave their shoes off and go over there and squat. And so that's been really, really good for us. But the next step in our progression from that weight squat is that counter squat. And these are all built into our block zero concepts. And so as freshmen, they go through these, and really anybody new to our program, we had a kid transfer last year, a special kid. He'll be a senior this year. He started with these progressions. I didn't take for granted, him coming from another program. I think it's important that he develop in a manner that best suits our philosophy. And so with this particular setting, we'll go with the milk crate for a period of time, and then we'll pull the milk crate and they'll perform the same movement. Obviously the idea is that box is a range, it's a guide, it's a landmark for them. It's not necessarily that end all be all. From there, we add a goblet, whether that's as you see this athlete here, it can be a med ball, it can be a dumbbell. That's the next progression, and you can see, he's got a 5 on that box, so we've adjusted his height, based on where we want him to be. Again, Olympic sports, and we do that for a number of reasons.
Hey, Monty, I think we lost you for about 15 seconds. Can you go back? You talked about raising his box. And
okay.
We heard.
Does everybody have me now? Are we good now?
Yeah.
Okay. So what I said was just, this is just an example of how we differentiated that box height, and some guys will use 145, some guys will have 2, some guys will squat to the bench. Again, that's going to look different for different athletes, and this is just an example, is all I said, of how we differentiated that with him. But again, this idea of loading the squat with this goblet style is really intriguing to me. If you read or follow any type of Jim Wendler stuff, that he's made a living on goblet squat exclusively with a lot of his younger developmental athletes, and they're using some tremendous weights. You're talking 150-pound dumbbells for 50 reps, 100-pound dumbbells for 100 reps. I mean, he's doing, and they're developing some tremendous levels of strength with a very, very basic movement. And not only do you get the lower body benefits of this movement, but think about the strength that it takes as you get into the higher weights, and the musculature development that happens by holding a 70, 80, 100, 125-pound dumbbell over a period of 25, 30, 50 squats. I mean, you're building the upper back, you're building the shoulders, the arms, tremendously during that time. So that's a great side effect of this type of movement. And again, it's something that I'm going to look at living more in this realm. I've actually, with our basketball, with our girls basketball and volleyball teams, I regressed them before the break back to the goblet squat. And I'm talking our older athletes, again, they were front squatting and they just weren't progressing. I just didn't like what I was seeing. I wasn't really comfortable. And so I just took them back down. I said, okay, hey, we're going back to basics. We're going back to the goblet squat. We're going back to that foundational movement, and we're just going to load it there. And my goal was just to stay with that until, either A, they demonstrated that they were ready to go back to front squatting. They wanted to go back to front squatting. or B, they didn't, and we stayed there with it. You know, that was kind of my goal. And because, again, just because I want to front squat our Olympic athletes, that's not, I mean, that's just the end goal. I'm perfectly fine if they were to want and to demonstrate the need to stay there with the goblet squat. I'm fine with that. I'm fine with that. That, you know, again, and I think we have things because you feel program XYZ is doing it. Can you guys still hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, it's showing unstable on mine. It's flashing. I don't know what's going on, but I think we're still good. So, so anyway, so yeah, so this, you know, is really a bread and butter movement for us in our program. Box squatting benefits. Now, we need to understand that there are different types of box squats. There are different types of box squats. And so I'm going the wrong way. Not all box squatting is the same, and I'll come back to that slide. Typically, what you're going to see in my weight room is going to look more like a squat to a box, or what Joe King calls a cloud squat, where you're going to squat down to that height and then hover, but you're not going to collapse and sit all the way down. It's going to be under control. You're going to come either touch and hover or just hover at above. Perform that squat to a box where you sit, stop, and then there's a dynamic contraction over that to overcome that static movement. We will do that, but you're not going to see in my weight room typically what you would see if you were to picture a Louis Simmons West Side or wide stance box squat, where the athlete sits way back, shins past parallel, and then performs a squat. I'm not comfortable teaching that style with the setup that we have and with the time that we have. And so that's what you're going to see. So I think it's important to see that. So what are the benefits to box squatting? Because I think box squatting, number one, it's a tremendous teaching tool. But there's some really good benefits with regards to you're able to recover faster. You know, work up to a heavy set of 5 off a box, and then work up to a heavy set of 5 free squat, and tell me how you feel the next day with regards to soreness. And you're typically not going to be as sore off the box as you were performing a free squat. So with regards to in-season training, and not just football, but really all athletes or all sports rather, I'm going to keep them on a box if I can with regards to squatting. If we're going to squat in season with that with that sport or team, it's going to start out off the box, you know, and that big that recovery component is a big part of that. The other piece, which is why I like the milk crates, and which is why I like the idea of squatting to a box, is you get that consistent depth every time. When you're working, especially with developmental athletes, consistency is going to be key with regards to have them learning proper depth and what that kinesthetically feels like. And I think when you're talking about working with those athletes, you know, consistency is huge. And that's why I like the box squat, because each rep they're getting feedback. Did I touch the box? Did I not touch the box? Sitting back allows you to load the posterior chain more effectively, so you get that reduction with knee pressure. Again, a lot of our developmental athletes are dealing with some growing pains, some Osgood-Schlatters disease, Oswald-Slater's disease. So it helps with the Oswald-Slater, and just taking that pressure off the knee. You know, again, our goal is to develop lower body strength. It's not necessarily to become the best squatter that we can. That's not their sport. And so this is a great tool and great variation. And then obviously it does allow us to tremendously build the posterior chain, the hips, hams, and glutes, you know. From an athletic application, this is the other piece that I like from a dynamic standpoint with regards to our dynamic effort squatting movement patterns. You're able to replicate that static overcome by dynamic contraction that we see so many times in sports, whether it's a receiver coming off the line, whether it's an offensive line or defensive lineman engaging their opponent, whether it's coming out of a stolen base situation in baseball, whether it's, you know, jumping in basketball, you know, you see this over and over again, this idea of static movements having to be overcome very, very rapidly. And so I feel it does a great job in teaching that. And, you know, again, depending upon whether you're actually sitting on the box, you know, you train that stretch reflex. And research tells us that, you know, we can go up to 8, maybe even 10 seconds or longer with that stretch reflex. So think about that lineman, we're talking football, sitting in that stance. You know, if you train that in the weight room, then you're going to get some carryover to that, which could help, you know, when you've got that long count or when you're looking to audible. So, you know, that's another really, really good benefit to box squatting. I think it's a tremendous tool, really, really good tool. We talked about that. Common issues in the squat: not being able to finish the lift, or, you know, stalling in the middle. You know, we have those athletes, they'll drive out of the hole and then stall right there parallel or just above. For me, where I would start is going to be more dynamic effort training, you know, blasting through those mini maxes, as Lou calls them, you know, getting them to create more force and more speed so you don't have those mini maxes. You know, that's you know, Lou talks about the best way to destroy a sticking point is to get faster, you know. So we'll look at some isometric training. You know, as we know, that strength varies up to 15 degrees either way at that position. So you can start either right above or just below where they stall, do some isometric work, and they're going to get some carryover again up to 15 degrees either direction. Sometimes it's a bracing issue, teaching them how to brace, teaching them how to breathe. I feel like so many people don't understand how to brace under a load. So many people think that when you come out of a contraction that you should exhale. It doesn't make sense to me, because what happens when you exhale? You relax. If I've got a maximal load on my back, the last thing I want to do is relax. How to create that intra-abdominal pressure and set their core. All those things will help, you know, having them, you know, either stalling at the middle or being able to finish. If you have an athlete who is a chronic high squatter, or maybe doesn't squat to the depth that you feel is proficient for them, then lower that box height. One of the ways you can do that is by placing various mats on top and lowering those mats throughout the workout, particularly with dynamic effort work. Start with 3 or 4 or 5 mats, and then as they go through their sets, pull a mat, you know, 2.5 inches each time, and then at the end of that set or the end of that movement, you know, and it's one that's minimal. It's not noticeable. It's gradual. That's what I'm looking for, gradual. And so that's a great way to help your athletes get lower or squat deeper within that particular session, is to start high and then go low. Knees caving in right now, especially with our female athletes, is something that is that we see a lot of. Teaching them how to grip the floor, teaching them how to create torque in the floor through their big toe, through a flat soled shoe, which is why I like the barefoot idea, because the athletes can feel their feet and where those pressure points are on the ground, and you can tell them, flex through your big toe, drive through your big toe, and they can have that tactile reinforcement. This has some powerlifting connotations in here with regards to the suit. You can pull your suit up higher, because if your suit is lower, it's going to force your knees forward. And that's the other thing with suits, is that you have to be apply pressure against the suit, stretch the suit, then you get the benefit of the suit. We can use bands around the knees to give them some external cueing, whether it's mini bands or TheraBands or whatever it is, and they push out on that hip circle, whatever you got, and create that cueing that way. If they're collapsing in the hole or rounding over in the hole, I would start with a couple cues by driving their head backwards into the bar, and by driving their elbows down and creating that upward chest or that proud chest. Sometimes it's just a positioning deal where they have to understand that my head, is not going to drop in the hole. I've got to keep my head back, elbows down, and maintain that upright position. Upper back work, obviously, good mornings, abs, and again, those coaching cues seem to do really, really well with regards to that issue. How would squat coming out of an off season? I think it's a gradual process. I don't believe in maxing athletes at the conclusion of their season, but I do think that you can train maximally at the end of a season if you do it smartly. And this is just one example of kind of a stair-step approach, tiptoeing back into that pool, not cannonball into the pool, tiptoe into the pool, where each step you increase, you increase the intensity a little bit more. And then by week 4, now you're actually on a low box, or quote unquote, what a traditional, squat would look like. I like the high box. You could also sub in a reverse band squat for that. And then from that, you go to a front squat. And again, each one's a little bit intensive, more intensive rather. That third week, take the bar off their back, let them deadlift, let them pull. And then that fourth week, so you've got 3 really good weeks where you can load them, and be safe. And then that fourth week, now if you want to max them, or now if you want to see where they're at, well, they've had, again, a pretty good cycle up to that point to do that. I want to wrap up with some specialty bar considerations. I've often said that if I could have one bar in the weight room, it would be the safety squat bar. I feel like it's got so many uses that are really, really good, but I'm going to have to recant that and probably say that if I could have one bar in a weight room for athletes, it's probably going to be the Mars bar. And if you're not familiar with it, if you haven't used it, check that out on YouTube. There's a lot of a lot of people are jumping on that bandwagon. And it's very similar to a safety squat bar. The thing about the safety squat bar is it lengthens the spine. It increases that fulcrum. It increases the distance away from your center of gravity, which it does is it actually sets the bar lower on your back, reinforcing your leverages. And so there's not nearly the lower back strain that you would have with a safety bar. The big benefit to a safety bar is that the shoulder isn't put in a compromised, externally rotated position. You know, Lou talks about all the time that big benches don't kill, big squats do. And so when you're talking with your athletes, comfortable situations to train, you know, so for some, squatting with a straight bar just flat out hurts for whatever reason. So you put a safety bar on there with a pad, and now all of a sudden they're not as scared. Again, make them comfortable, meet them where they are. If I don't have one of those two, I'm probably again, best case scenario, money's no object. You know, if I ever get to design a weight room, I would have some type of camber bar. Again, something to take the shoulders out of it, because, you know, the idea is that we minimize the impact on the body. And yeah, you might say, well, they're 15, 16, 17-year-old athletes, you know, their shoulders are just fine. That's true. It is true. But why are we going to add wear and tear that isn't necessary? And especially when you have options, when you have different avenues to go, you know, why not? If you can, you know, we're fortunate. We've got 2 safety bars right now. I mean, it's better than none. You know, hopefully this year we get to buy 2 more, and then just keep adding that. And then eventually, you know, that's kind of where we're probably going to end up. And I say safety bars just because, again, from a cost standpoint, that Mars bar is not cheap. But if I ever get to do that, that's probably the route I would go, just because you know, it's a really, really unique bar, but it's got some tremendous versatility to it. Yes, you know, multi-grip bars and fat bars, to me, are superior over the straight bar. The only reason people use those straight bars is because that's what they compete with. You know, again, our athletes aren't competitive lifters, so let's try to diversify how we do things, and again, give them a more enjoyable training experience. Okay, so I think it's almost 5 o'clock somewhere, but that's really all I had. If you've got questions, I'll be happy to stay on and visit and talk. If you don't, I appreciate taking your time to hear me ramble for a little bit.
Coach, I got a question.
Yeah.
Are there any particular exercises like that you feel like aid in making a better squatter that's not necessarily a squat?
Yeah. How can we jump off this screen share
here? You should be able to.
Share it. Duh. There we go. Okay. Oh, here we go. We're back. Yeah. So the number one builder for me that I wholeheartedly believe in would be, and again, it's dependent upon what you have in your weight room. But if I've got glute ham raises, that's the first thing I'm going to. That's the first thing I'm going to. 3 sets of 10, three times a week. No question. When I was first introduced to that, I did that for a month. And, you know, I was already a decent squatter. I was like 675, and it took me to almost 800 in a month.
So do you feel like that was strengthening your prime movers, or was that strengthening the, you know, stability type muscles, or what do you attribute that to?
Well, I mean, basically, you know, improving hamstring strength, you know, hamstring, lower back, and glutes. You know, those are the, and again, I'm talking in powerlifting terms, but they cross over to athletic development. You know, but yeah, I mean, anytime that you can improve the hips, hams, and glutes, you're going to see it carry over in lower body strength and development. So. What's Kyle talking about? Technical issues. We're just fine, Kyle. Hush. But yeah, so that's number one. Number two would probably be some type of good morning for volume. And again, that's, you have to be careful in how you load that. Probably wouldn't do it with the juvenile's not the right word, young, inexperienced, you know, freshman, sophomore. That would probably be for my high level junior who's going into their senior year, who maybe wants or needs to develop a little bit more. You know, we could do some high rep good morning stuff there. Hamstring curls, banded hamstring curls. Again, another great developer of the squat. Because here's the thing is, you have to do things, in my opinion, that are not squatting. Does that make sense? Like, you have to find the best movement that has the least impact on the body. Does that make sense? Like, sure, we can go do a volume phase. Yeah, we can go 5x10 or whatever and improve their squat. But how much more wear and tear have we added to their body and stress on their body that may or may not be necessary? You know what I mean? And so that's why that glute ham raise is huge. That's why these specialty exercises, to me, that's where we need to be adding value to our weight room if we can. Not I mean, that to me, you know, belt squats, inverse leg curl, reverse hyper, you know, that's where we can load the body with the least amount of stress and get the most bang for our buck in these developmental athletes, because we think they're indestructible because they're who they are. And in a lot of ways they are indestructible. I mean, they're very, very resilient, you know. With them, and they're going to show improvement. That's also the worst thing about a high school athlete, is that we don't get to necessarily see the pitfalls in our training, because they're training in spite of maybe the negativity that we're causing. Jeremy Hefner, who's Baylor women's basketball strength coach and who was a high school strength coach for a couple of years, he uses the analogy of the credit card. And that credit card's only got, you know, so many bins in it. And if we use all those bins up in high school and that athlete goes to play at the college level, well, that might, yeah, sure, they survived high school just fine, but they might be a time bomb waiting to go off in college because of all the stress that was placed on them during their high school program. And so, you know, when you're looking at ways to build up those lifts, to me, you're going to add your volume with those single limb and then through machine type movements. Does that answer you? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And I had a conversation with a coach the other day. You know, we were talking about programming, and I was like, I'm not a big go sprint conditioning guy. I said, I would much rather see sled pulls or pushes and then farmer's carries and stuff. And he's like, well, it's not really running. And I'm like, Yeah, but it's also not going to kill them as much on the recovery end of things. You know, they're going to recover a lot faster from a farmer's walk than they are running 10 100-yard sprints.
And, that's something that, as I've gotten older, more experienced, those are the types of modalities I'm looking towards in my own training is what can I do that's going to have a therapeutic component to it, but also elicit the training effect that I want, traction-based training with the lower bodies become kind of a buzzword right now. And that's something I think there's a lot to it. When you're talking belt squats, you're talking reverse hyper, you're talking 45-degree back raise. Everything we do is compressive in nature. We never get to alleviate that compression. Everything we do is just pounding down, down, down. So what can I do from a traction standpoint? Kettlebell swings, again, another phenomenal modality. What can I do to alleviate that stress? What can I do to provide therapy, but also improve whatever it is I'm improving, if it's lower body strength or whatever.
Yes.
So hopefully that makes sense.
And I think, Louis sometimes too, he'll talk about like, well, we're not just building muscle. We have to like build up the tendons and the ligaments. They have to be resilient too. And it takes those parts of our bodies a lot longer to build up.
Yeah. That's something that again, we don't touch on a lot in high school just because again, our athletes are pretty resilient. They're very pliable but again, you still should have an aspect of that in there, whether it's high rep band work or whether it's high rep, again, single limb to me, again, I don't think you need to be doing, very many, 15, 20, rep squats or really compound movements for that matter, deadlifts, whatever it is, there's better ways to do that. Use other tricks like bands, using things like ankle weights for leg curls, leg extensions with ankle weights, get the most bang for your buck and not, something I just thought of, if you can use a pebble to break a window, don't use a grenade, you use the smallest way to do that.
Yeah, I agree. Hey, before we wrap up, I wanted to give you an opportunity to talk about the forum that you have. That saved my soul during quarantine, to be able to have like human communication between other people and to know that other people were like out there training and things like that. So could you talk about that for a minute?
Did I lose you? There you go. Oh, say it. All right, come back on. I think I lost you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're back.
Okay, I just wanted you to talk about your forum that you have.
Yeah, so what Dalton's talking about is I've got a website right now. It's STS Perform /forum, and it's open to anybody. But what it is just something that I created based on a concept that was really popular in the early to mid 2000s in the powerlifting realm. It was a way for guys to share videos. It was a way for guys to communicate. There was a lot of trolling going on. There's a lot of, it was really, Twitter before Twitter and all that stuff was popular, but it was a great way to have a centralized hub for a lot of really good information. Again, there was a section for training logs. There were different breakdowns about different training concepts. And so all I did was just kind of, I'm trying to bring that back. We do have a training log session. We've got a section about triphasic. We got a section about RPR. We got a section about nutrition, and then, just general threads on there. And of course, anybody, any coach is welcome. You have to be approved, so Make sure that I can tell that you're not a robot or something like that by your email. But some really high level guys who post their training, and it's motivating. For some of us who train alone or with a smaller group, it's good to see how other people are training. It's good to see what other ideas are out there, and really, I just created it to hopefully be a resource and a place for coaches to kind of share information. Form.com/forum, and it's still growing, but hopefully, it'll pick up speed. And the idea is that, again, it's a place to share ideas and learn from one another.
Coach, I think we had another question in the chat.
Okay, let's take a look. How do I set up my blocks and levels? Yeah, so block 0, typically our freshmen will stay in block 0 through the entire year. I've tried to fast track those, Nick, meaning from there, as they progress up to our quote unquote varsity period, then you're going to see some 5-3-1 variations. You're going to start to see some nuances of conjugate, and depending upon the sport and the athlete, we might do some French contrast, or some type of triphasic work, but more French contrast and triphasic. I really haven't done much triphasic. With our older guys, juniors and seniors, but that's really what it looks like as far as how they progress. All of our athletes deadlift and learn how to front squat as freshmen. They don't clean. We don't do any cleans at all with our freshmen. And the idea behind that is I want them to be comfortable pulling weight off the floor, and I want them to be comfortable in that rack position, quote unquote, catching weight. Because to me, if you can teach an athlete to get in proper position off the floor, and then teach them how to be comfortable in that front squat position, then the jump takes care of itself. And so we spend a lot of time on that. And those are just good foundational fundamental movements. You get a guy who can front squat 315, 350 and pull, 4 plates off the floor, double overhand. That's the other thing. We don't use the powerlifting mixed grip, cheater grip. We're using double overhand. And that adds another layer of governing to the weight. The grip becomes a limiting factor for a lot of our athletes, but it's a great way to develop that safely. And so there's nothing wrong with those movements. They spend a lot of time learning how to jump, learning how to land, learning how to sprint, and that really lays the foundation as we go forward. Something I'm working on adding right now to our we'll have names for them, and it's nothing really cool. It's just once they demonstrate, and it's one of those things that it when you see it. And as I've gotten older, it's becoming easier to pick out, and those athletes who are higher level. And so now we're going to start doing some velocity based stuff. I've got some push bands. I've got another training device, accelerometer that we're playing with right now. And so that's the next step. So really you're going from this block 0 concept to some different meat and potatoes type training. Again, 5-3-1, APRE, and then those athletes. And really you're talking about the top 10%. You're talking, 5, 10, maybe 12 athletes that you'd be working with get to that higher level, and really working on RFD, rate of force development, because at that point, the idea is that they have demonstrated that they have enough quote unquote strength. Look like, if you're an O lineman, and I mean, yeah, body weight comes into it a little bit, but if you're squatting 500 pounds with just a belt and it's a good, not, and I say good squat, then it's probably time to look at some type of velocity based training, if you're a skill guy and again, you're squatting, 350 plus, 400 plus, so 1.75 to 2 times body weight, is probably good for a high school kid. And I could even make an argument for 1.5 times body weight, because again, yes, we want them to be strong as possible, but there does come a time where that pendulum needs to shift to how fast can you demonstrate that strength, because sport is not about grinding out, slow movements. It's fast, dynamic movements. And so we want to train those things, but you have to have the strength before you can begin to elicit that speed. But people tend to hang out in that strength because it's easy to do. And we like seeing those numbers go up as strength coaches. And I'm just as guilty as anybody with that. But now that there's these products out that are becoming a lot more affordable to high school strength coaches, because I don't know about anybody else, but my budget is this, 0. And so to get some of this stuff, but we're at a point where we do have a couple options, and so that's what that looks like. But yeah, all freshmen are going to stay in that block 0 the entire year. Really, going into their sophomore year, they're still not going to be doing anything too exotic. But once they've demonstrated coming out of their sophomore years, they're pretty strong, because you can be strong and be a crap athlete. I'm a great example of that. But had I had some of that other, velocity based type training for me, maybe that might would have made a difference for me. I don't know. But that's where we're moving towards. That's where we're moving towards is more data, I guess. More applied performance, if you will. So hopefully that helps. If not, you got my number, Nick. You can call me and we'll talk about it.
Awesome. Does anybody else have any other questions? All right, man. Monty, I appreciate you, man.
No, thanks so much for the opportunity. It's always good to share, and it's always an opportunity for me to grow. And because, again, if I can't explain or defend my ideas or why we're doing what we're doing, then I probably need to look at doing something else, So really appreciate, and again, I'm always humbled by people who want to hear my thoughts because again, I'm just like everybody else. He's trying to figure out the best way, And so, again, I really appreciate you guys coming on. I'm very humbled.
Man, I appreciate you being here. And like I said, every time I get a chance to hear you talk, man, I learn something new. And it's good to be, in your presence, even from afar.
Well, hey, I appreciate that, brother. Thank you so much. Absolutely. This has been really, really good. Really good.
Awesome. Next week, guys, would it be better to do this like in the evening time? you think?
I mean, yeah, you know, all of us with kids would probably agree with that, you know.
Okay.
But I think it's probably good, Dalton. I mean, yeah, it's good to have this live interaction right now, but I like being able to go back and watch some of that stuff, you know.
Okay.
You know, it doesn't always have to be, you know, live. You know, it could be you and somebody else.
Yeah.
And then you send that recording out, you know.
Okay.
And, you know, that works too. That works really well.
Okay. So that's what I'll continue to do. I'll continue to upload that to YouTube and then send out the link. And guys, feel free to share this with whoever, administrators, coaches, strength coaches, whoever, you know, athletes. If they, you know, you just got a kid that like might want to be a strength coach or is just really interested in training, like go ahead and feel free to share it with them. So
Man.
awesome. Well, thanks guys. Y'all have a great day. And
Appreciate you guys. Best of luck this summer.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Good stuff, Monty.
What?
Good stuff.
Oh, thanks, brother. Thanks,
Yeah,
guys.
man.
Appreciate you. All right. Well, I'm jumping off of here. You guys have my number. I'm on Twitter, social media, Facebook, whatever. If I can help any way, please let me know. Be happy to do so.
Awesome.
Okay. So thank you guys. We'll see you.